We are very sad to hear about the loss of Greg Millen, one of the great Blues goalies of all time. He was a friend of the show. We had him on a few years ago, and I'm happy to bring this interview back for anyone who's interested in hearing Greg Millen discuss his time with the St. Louis Blues. Enjoy, and RIP Greg Millen. And this is Let's Go Blues Radio Past to the Future. Today we're working on our past segment here, and I'm joined by a former Blues goaltender. He is now an announcer on Hockey Night in Canada. He's a color commentator for Maple Leafs broadcasts on Sportsnet Ontario, but I think we all remember him best as the goaltender for the St. Louis Blues during the 1986 playoffs, which we'll get to. Greg Millen joins the show. Greg, thank you very much for joining today.
Oh, my pleasure. I always love connecting with my old home in St. Louis, so it's always a lot of fun.
How often do you make it back here?
Not enough. Probably just when I do the broadcast these days. Still have some great friends in St. Louis. It was by far my favorite stop in my career. Seems like a second home for all of us. So we had a daughter born there, but unfortunately, with all the other responsibilities in life, we don't get back nearly as much as I would like.
No, you have a very busy schedule with Maple Leafs games and especially working Hockey Night in Canada. I'm sure most of your games are held in Canada there when you do that. So, but it's always good to hear from Blues alumni. Again, we always have the Blues alumni boxes filled almost every single night there's a game. Who do you talk to the most that still lives in the St. Louis area? You still talk to Bernie and all them?
Well, Bernie's my old roommate for almost the entire time I was at St. Louis. So we always have a visit. Of course, Bernie's in the media business also, so it makes it quite convenient to catch up with him. It's funny enough, I ran into Brian Sutter about a year and a half ago at his farm. I was speaking out that way, so that was a wonderful catch up. Dougie Gilmore, I do see around the Toronto market once in a while. But as for St. Louis, it's always Bernie.
Oh, yeah.
And Darren Pang. Let's not forget Panger, too.
We consider him Blues. We'll consider him Blues alumni. He's adopted.
I think now that he's with the Cup situation, I think we can do that. Yeah, absolutely.
He's definitely been adopted into the Blues family. He in the Winter Classic, the alumni game, he played for the Blackhawks, and it was so funny talking to people on the concourse that were like, "Wait, why is Darren Pang playing for the Blackhawks?" Like, well, that's where he played in his career, and nobody knew that. They all just assumed he was just a Blues guy. So. Gotta love it. Darren Pang, definitely a member of the Blues family now.
Yeah, we had just to interrupt on that, we had a great playoff, the two of us. We played against each other, and Panger was at the other end, and he had a real good series, actually. And but the good guys won. Sorry about that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Man, Darren Pang had a great series in goal, huh? I'm sure he doesn't talk about his good games that much.
Oh, he'll tell you that one if you ask him. Just give him some time.
We'll have to get him on for sure. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your career before you came to St. Louis, first of all. So you were selected 102nd overall in the 77 draft by the Pittsburgh Penguins. First played in 1978-79, 20 games as a rookie, or 28 games as a rookie. When you came into the NHL, obviously you had already played a bunch of important games in your career, but nothing more important than stepping onto the ice in the NHL for the first time. Do you recall that day and what was going through your mind when that happened?
You're going to laugh. I barely recall it, like a lot of players. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I was basically out of hockey when I came to the year before. I was released everywhere in the International Hockey League and everywhere you could think of. Went back home at Christmas and enrolled in university. Was going to play Canadian university hockey. And at the time, if you did that, you were pretty much finished. I got a call from the Sioux Greyhounds. A guy by the name of Wayne Gretzky called me up. Not Wayne, but Angelo Bobacco, but Wayne Gretzky was on the team as a rookie. And so I thought, well, I might as well go up there. It sounds like a good time for a half a year, and then I'll go to school the next year. Well, thanks to Wayne and a pretty good hockey club, I had a lot of success that year as a team. And then the next year, I was in the NHL playing for Pittsburgh. So the long and the short of your answer is I was out of hockey, ended up playing in Pittsburgh, got a great chance by Baz Bastien, and at the time, the late Johnny Wilson, and ended up playing 28 games that year. I think my first game, I got blown out, if I remember correctly. I'm not quite sure about this. Got pulled into the office from Baz Bastien, and he was about to send me to the American Hockey League. I'm pretty sure of it. but he grabbed a swivel chair to illustrate that he had to hold on to the short side in goaltending, and he fell behind his chair. The swivel chair took off on him. And at that point, he just said, "Get out of here, kid." So I think if he wouldn't have fallen, they would have ended up the minors. But the good news is he fell, and I stayed up with the big team and ended up playing a fair bit that year.
Wow, that's some luck right there. You gotta love hearing that.
It's pretty good. We all had a bit going in, yes, for sure.
Wow. So you mentioned Baz Vastines. That was going to be my next question for you. In June 1981, something happened that you will never see happen again because of the way the social media age works. You were signed as a restricted free agent by the Hartford Whalers. Pittsburgh could have matched, but GM Baz Vastine was on vacation and he was unaware that you had signed. The deadline to match passed and you went to Hartford. Walk me through that. That had to be a very strange situation, even before the digital age. That's very odd. You don't hear that often.
Well, the St. Louis connection is Larry Plow. Larry
Right.
was the general manager in Hartford at the time, a brand new general manager, and they were looking to retool things. And I had a fun series before that, of course, with Pittsburgh playing against the Boston Bruins at the time, and so. Anyway, to make the long and the short of it is, Larry asked us, I believe it was just around the draft, they came up with an offer. And we told Hartford that that's fine, but we owe it to Pittsburgh to go back to them first because they gave me my start in my career. I didn't really want to leave Pittsburgh. And Larry was very kind about it. He said, "You go ahead and do that. And if it doesn't work out, we'd love to have you." So we did send the offer back to Pittsburgh and said, the story is that Baz didn't really believe us. He thought we were bluffing. And then he went golfing. We didn't hear from Pittsburgh. And I remember on a Sunday, I got a call in the morning from my agent, who was basically a criminal lawyer at the time from the Sioux, who I met, Frank Caputo. And he said, well, they want to sign us and we haven't heard a thing. And Hartford's called back. I said, well, I guess we got to sign. Pittsburgh obviously doesn't want me. So that day we jumped in a plane, went through New York City, ended up running on the tarmac, if you can believe this. Could you imagine doing that in this day and age? To catch the next plane. Ended up in a small prop job to get to Hartford from New York. Signed that night on a Sunday night, had dinner at Larry and Wendy Plow's house. And then the Monday morning, I got a call from the president of the Pittsburgh Penguins, the late Paul Martha, and he said, I heard you just signed. And we said, what do you mean you heard? We told you. He said, well, nobody told me this. He said, what if we offer you a U.S. Steel? I said, I'd love U.S. Steel, but it's too late. We've already signed. And that was the end of the story. And the president never found out from the manager. The manager never told anybody that we had an offer.
Wow, that's an even crazier story than what I had read. That's nuts.
Yeah, and Eddie Johnson was the manager, who I still see with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he was our coach then, not our manager, our coach, and he was devastated. I had a real special relationship with E.J. Johnson because he helped me, being a former goalie. So that was a tough move for me, and really didn't want to do it at the time, but that's what happened.
Obviously, you went on to play for some pretty good teams, again, in St. Louis as well, and the 1986 team comes to mind. But when you look at Pittsburgh and the way that they grew with Mario coming in and Jaromir Jagr later, is there any kind of regret on your end for not just, saying, sorry, Hartford, I'm going to stick in Pittsburgh?
Well, I didn't have a choice because they never got back to me, and there was a lot of money involved. The other side of the story is the year going into my option year in Pittsburgh, I had Alan Eagleson, and he recommended that I sign. I was making $40,000 at the time in the National Hockey League, and I played 60 games in my second year. So that was a bit of being, to say the least, even then I'm being underpaid. Pittsburgh offered me $70,000 going into my final third year of the option. I went up to the Sioux on a trip, and I ran into a guy by the name of Frank Caputo, who was a criminal lawyer who dabbled in sports agents, and he said to me, if you sign that, you're crazy. I wasn't feeling good about Alan Eagleson anyway. I had a sort of an interesting feel about him. It didn't feel right, so I fired him. That was quite a conversation. If you fire Alan Eagleson back in the day, you get it pretty hard. So as a young man, that was the first lesson. I hired Frank Caputo and played my option out, playing another 60 games at $40,000 a year. So I was losing all that money because I was offered 70. So the long and the short of it is, played played my option out, and then Pittsburgh didn't want to give me much more of a raise, and then I got a signing bonus that was much more. And my first year salary, I believe at the time, was 160 for the Hartford Whalers. So it became a bit of a financial move also. But the answer to your story is the answer to your question, I had no choice. But in saying that, yeah, I mean, I think all athletes would love to stay with their same organization their whole career. But as it turns out, St. Louis was the one that I absolutely loved. So it worked out in the end.
So you were a goalie that played a lot. 1981-82 for the Whalers. You end up taking over the starting role from John Garrett when you shortly after you signed. 55 games played in 81-82, 83-84. You led the NHL with 60 appearances for the Whalers. How taxing is that for a goalie? Obviously, we really don't see that anymore. But if we saw, I know Braden Holtby had quite the long run just a couple of years ago. How taxing is that for a goaltender?
Well, what's odd about it, I can never figure out how everybody grabs on to 60 games is too much in today's game. I don't get it. We hear a lot of it from the media up here, to be quite honest with you, with Frederick Anderson in the Toronto market. We didn't have charter planes. We had back-to-back games. We'd leave the city at 7 in the morning and jump on a commercial flight, get in, have lunch, and play. I mean, I played hurt like all athletes do at times in net. But to me, in this day and age, I don't think 60 games is too many for a goalie. I don't really understand it. Back then, probably was, because there were days where I was tired in net and probably shouldn't have been in the goal, but that's what we did back in the day. Everybody, was a starting goalie, played 60 games. But for me, in this day and age, the way they travel, the way their fitness is, I mean, the game is better, it's quicker. I get all that. There's no question it's more taxing because of the media, social media, everything that goes on for an athlete today. But I mean, if you're any kind of goaltender at all, I still think you can play 60 games in this league.
No, I'm with you. I see this all the time. Back when the Blues had Brian Elliott and Yaroslav Halak, and one guy would play 45 games. People would say, "Oh, that's too much for him." Really? Because I feel like that when you're a number one goalie, you want to play every single night. If you could be in there every night, you would be. I mean, look at a guy like Grant Fuhr. That's his mentality. That's my goal. I want it, and it's always interesting to me when I hear that too, because I'm thinking, goalies, if it was up to them, they'd be in every night. They would never have a night off.
Yeah, everybody wants to play. Some of these goalies in today's game, well, they don't want to be. It's interesting. They think they get tired or they don't feel just right. I mean, they are finely tuned athletes today, but I do find it interesting. I will say this, though. If the two goalie system can work in certain situations, I know it did in St. Louis for Rick Walmsley and myself. We were great friends. So we had the ability to go back and forth and compete with a friendly competition between each other. I've got some great, you got to get, I don't know if you have yet, but Rick Walmsley was a funny guy, and we had a lot of fun together. The best one that people don't know is the late Baz Bastien. Everybody knows everybody has a Baz Bastien story, and we had more than a few back in the day, but we got wind that he ripped the telephone off the wall one night when Rick was in net after a bad goal, and he was replaced, and it was dangling over the press box at the old St. Louis Arena. We got wind of this, so every time, and I can tell you this, every time one of us got yanked from the game, we touch each other's pads and quietly say to each other, as mad as we could be, the guy getting out, AT&T award. So, every time we got yanked. Nobody knows that story, but it was a lot of fun, and Rick was a great partner. Another time, Rick had an injury, and I pulled a groin in practice. The old sauna was right in the middle of our locker room, and it had a little tiny hole about this big in it. Jacques Demers came storming in the room looking for his goaltenders for practice because we had both left the ice, and we were in the sauna watching him look all over the room, giggling like crazy as the team didn't have a goalie. So we had all kinds of great times and stories together. Rick would be a fun guy to get on. He's got some dandies.
Yeah, that sounds like, yeah. I've always heard different stories from Rick Walmsley, and getting him on and hearing them from the man himself would be quite interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. You come to St. Louis February 21st, traded with Mark Johnson for Mike Liut and Jorgen Pettersson. And Bernie Federko, in his book, he talks about how Mike Liut was basically moving him was a bad call. Mike Liut's one of the best goalies of all time. But then he said that you find out that, Greg Millen's quite the goalie himself. So you come to this team with Federico, Mark Hunter, Rob Ramage, Doug Gilmour, Joey Mullen, Brian Sutter. I mean, the names just go on, and you go into that 1986 team. What was it like stepping into the locker room for the St. Louis Blues and seeing all these guys that are really some of the better players in the NHL?
Well, first of all, my old roomie's looking after me a bit. I mean, at the time, it was a bad trade. I mean, and it was a money trade. Simple as that. Ludi was making a good buck. I wasn't making nearly as much. So it became a money trade. Mark Johnson had the great Olympics, of course. So he was, an asset as well at the time. But I'll never forget this. And it really speaks volumes to the kind of leader that Brian Sutter was in his day and still is. I think it was Buffalo. In fact, I know it was Buffalo. I was traded in Buffalo. Those days, you carry your own hockey bag into the rink. Of course, the hockey bag, goalie bag, was as big as I was. So I'm struggling with it to get it through the door because, that was the only time I probably would have carried it the entire season, thanks to our great trainers. And Brian Sutter came down the hall. He grabbed my hockey bag, threw it over his shoulder, said, come into the room, took me into the locker room and introduced me to every player. And that kind of leadership I just hadn't seen before. And other than the old Pittsburgh guys in Pittsburgh, they were pretty fantastic. Ronnie Francis was our leader, if you can believe it, in Hartford, but he was 18 years of age. So this was really special to me. And it gives you an idea of how Brian was as a captain and how scared I was coming into a team, knowing that I was just traded for a very popular player and playing against him, of course, in a series earlier, a real good goalie. So that was a tough one, and I always thank Brian to this day for helping me start on the right foot in St. Louis.
So again, talking about the 86 team, go to the conference finals. You obviously lived through the Monday Night Miracle, which is still heralded as one of the greatest moments in St. Louis sports history. What was it like for you witnessing, the giant comeback and seeing Doug Wickenheiser score that big one there on St. Louis home ice?
Yeah, it was interesting because both Rick and I both contributed that series. Rick was Calgary's team, or Calgary was Rick's team, if you will, and I had Toronto and in Minnesota, I think it was at that time, and it worked out well because Wammer always played very well against Calgary. In fact, that's why he ended up there and won a Stanley Cup there in the end. But I was on the bench, and I'll never forget it. But more than anything else, you always remember the crowd in St. Louis at the old St. Louis Arena. It was deafening at times. And, yes, I got rained on one night because there was a hole in the rink, or a hole in the roof rather, and it was hitting my head. And yes, it was so hot you could hardly function in many games. I mean, talk about the heat at ice level. I can't even imagine what it was at the time. But it had a special atmosphere to it it'll never be replaced, really. And not only in St. Louis. I mean, there was one in Chicago that was very similar in the Chicago Stadium. Boston had a building like it, but you could put the old St. Louis Arena right there with them both. And so that really made it special, that particular game, because of the fans. And they were elated. The place went nuts. And it was quite a night.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, from going to games as a fan, sitting in the back rows, whenever everybody would stomp their feet, you could feel the arena moving. And I remember as a kid being like, "Oh my God, this place is coming down," and my dad telling me, "Yeah, that's how this place is. You get used to it." And it was quite the arena for sure. And what were the locker rooms like there? I've always wondered. Probably not the best in the league, right?
No, they weren't much at all. We did have the sauna in the middle of the locker room. I'm not kidding, just to the side there. Really not much to it at all. A little tiny lounge, really, that was just to get changed. And then we had Normie Mackey's training room, which was the melting pot, which always is in a locker room. Everybody seems to still go to the training room, and Normie was always there telling his stupid jokes, and we were all together. But again, very small. And then the coach's office was around the corner, and that's where, Jacques Martin hung out, and where Doug Gilmour used to steal his Diet Coke all the time and put it in my stall, and he'd come in and blame me. Jacques was a Diet Cokeaholic at the time. So that was always fun. And then you had, of course, the great Barclay Plager, who I wouldn't want to go through this interview without talking about. He was our father figure. He was our mentor. He was the person that taught us about life. He had the ability to give us heck, and then he'd walk away and you'd feel good about it. He was quite a special man. And, in the end, we were carrying him through airports. He was so ill. And to watch the character that he had and the courage was absolutely remarkable. So I wouldn't want to, at all talk to you about the St. Louis Blues without bringing his name up.
Oh, Barclay is he's still very much an important figure in Blues hockey long after he's passed. He all the time you hear stories about how much that guy loved and lived for Blues hockey. Um, very, very sick, very ill, still wanting to come to the rink, still wanting to be a part of the team. And again, that's something that Bernie Federico talked about on our show was just how Barclay, what it meant to him as a young man coming into the Blues organization and first being coached there in the Kansas City squad, and then coming up and moving up to St. Louis and being a coach there as well. So yes, Barclay Plager, that's a guy that we said when the Blues released their mascot that they should have named him Barclay because I think that would have been perfect.
yeah. He's a very special man. You could add Brian Sutter to that list as well. And I used to have a lot of fun because I would travel to the airport with Brian and Bernie. That was the threesome in the car, and I'd sit in the back because the two lived beside each other, so they'd always get the front. But that was okay because I'd sit in the back seat, and they had a love-hate. You had the skilled guy that did everything easy, and you had the gritty guy that had to do everything in the hard way. And the skilled guy didn't want to hear about the work ethic sometimes from the other guy, and they'd go back and forth. And all I did was sit in the back seat, and I'd stir the pot. And that provided some great fun all the way to the airports on the rides that I still cherish to this day, thinking back and how much fun we had.
So who was the biggest prankster with the Blues, at least, that you think you played with? It sounded like you had a couple, but is there one that stands out?
Oh, easy, Gilmore. Not even close.
Gilmore? Yeah.
Yeah, he had a lot of them, but holes in the bottom of the coffee cups was a Doug Gilmore. He was, if you let him in our room at night, we'd always have Chinese food, Bernie and I, for the guys coming in after maybe they had one or two extra refreshments. So we'd have them come in to make sure they had something to eat. And it's amazing how in the morning I'd wake up and I couldn't find my toothbrush. And then I realized it was floating in the back of the toilet. And then I put one and one together and I knew who did it. That was Gilmore.
Of course, it's always Gilmore.
So that was just one easy one. There are a lot of the ones I can't tell, but that was one I can tell.
Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah. So again, the 86 team was really good, but you stayed in St. Louis for a while longer. 88, 89, you had an NHL high 6 shutouts, 52 starts, 22, 20-7 record. And, really just a great year for you. Do you look back at that year as your best year in net, or do you think it was better when you were splitting more time with Rick Wamsley?
Well, I was on a roll for sure. Our team was also. I think that was the year I got traded, though. So
it was.
Yeah. So you have 6 shutouts, and you love the city, and then all of a sudden you're gone. It was a tough one, a real tough one, particularly when you're gone to Quebec City, where it was an area where the team wasn't very good, and you had 3 young children at the time, and didn't really want to move. So that goes through for every athlete, and we all go through it. I mean, there was a bit of controversy at the trade. I should clear this up for the folks in Quebec and anybody else that kind of wonders what happened. I had a contract done in St. Louis. Jack Quinn had a deal done verbally, and then he turned around and traded me. So, so that didn't go so well for me or my, Frank Caputo, the same agent at the time. So the reason for the delay and the fuss that I put up was that, quite frankly, we wanted to have something in writing when we went to Quebec because we didn't think it was fair the way it was handled. And in the end, I would have stayed in Quebec if I wanted my family to learn French. It would have been a great opportunity for the kids and so on. But they had such a horrible team, and I was at the stage in my career where I couldn't help them, and I wanted to try to win. So that's why it didn't last very well in Quebec City, although the perception was always I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to go to Quebec. I didn't want to be in French Canada. Really not true at all. But, of course, a lot of those stories couldn't be told publicly at the time.
Oh, of course not. No, that's, and the man you are, I doubt that you were pitching a fit just about playing for a certain team. So I'm sure that it was all about the contract and the way it was handled. I mean, those are the kind of things you don't hear about until long after.
Well, I appreciate that, but yeah, I mean, it just and sometimes things happen in contracts too, where a trade comes up, and I just thought that they should honor it. It wasn't so much the trade; it was the deal that was done. That's all, and it worked out.
Yes, yeah, it worked out. Blues end up getting Jeff Brown, and you move on with Tony Herkis. And again, I told you this off air that I wanted to have you on after I talked to Jeff Brown, because my favorite part of the interview was when he talked about that trade, how he was back in Quebec taking shots from the point in just a warm up or a practice, and you had seen it and said that's the kind of guy we need. Turned around, you get traded for Jeff Brown. I mean, it's funny now. We can look back and laugh now, I'm sure, but I'm sure there was a lot of frustration and anger when that happened.
Uh, Not really, not really. I mean, it was kind of funny at the time, because don't forget, I mean, I drove with Brian Sutter for a couple of years. He was a very good friend, and now he's my coach. So I'm sitting beside a friend slash coach, just the two of us on the Quebec bench. It's maybe something you wouldn't say to every coach, but I could because of the situation. And I said, geez, Brian, we got to get that guy. I mean, we do, our power play, wouldn't he be something? And he said, yeah, you're right. And 2 weeks later, the deal was done in New York City, and I get called in by Brian. And he says, I got news for you. You really like that Brown, huh? I said, yeah, I do. He said, well, we just traded for him. I said, that's great. Fantastic. And then he said, no, they traded. It was for you, though. So to make matters worse, I mean, remember, there's no social media back in the day and everything else. And this didn't happen. There was some confidentiality involved. At that point in life, you had a chance to tell your wife first before it got out on the media, unlike today. So I call my wife back in St. Louis, and she answers the phone, bonjour, because Jack Quinn's daughter was in the media business, and he broke the news before my wife found out about it. So that didn't make me very happy either at the time, based on the contract situation. But that's how that went down. So she knew before I did, basically. And
sounds like she has a good sense of humor about it, though.
Well, yeah, I don't know if there was some sarcasm involved in that or not, but anyway. That was interesting, and I mean, trades happen, and you sign up for that. But it was just a funny story that you look back on now. And by the way, another great trade. I mean, the Blues made one bad trade getting me, and a really good trade getting rid of me with Brown, because he turned out to be a heck of a hockey player.
Yeah, Jeff Brown, still to this day one of the best Blues defensemen to ever wear the note. So, speaking of defensemen, though, I wanted to ask you, of all your time and in all of the NHL, not just St. Louis, who was probably the best defenseman you think you ever played behind?
Oh boy, I mean, I don't like to do that because it sort of eliminates other players, but. I can give you, I mean, Rammer was great in St. Louis for us, stay-at-home guy, tough guy, worked hard, competitive as can be. So, I mean, he'd be certainly there. I mean, in Chicago, Doug Wilson, now a Hall of Famer, fantastic. You go back to the Pittsburgh days, and I had some old school guys, but I also had a guy by the name of Randy Carlyle, Norris Trophy winner. So I had my share of pretty good defense in front of me, thank goodness, because I couldn't stop anything. So that was a good thing.
Oh, I don't believe that for 1 second. So you played out the rest of your career, and you mentioned Quebec, and then move on to Chicago, the Rangers, Detroit. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, and there's another St. Louis connection here. Your coach in Chicago in the 1990 playoffs, Mike Keenan, who everyone loves here in St. Louis. He played, and I'm being sarcastic, of course. He played 3 separate goalies in the run to the semifinals that year. You led the team with 15 appearances, but you also played alongside Ed Belfour and Jacques Cloutier in a playoff series. You mentioned you and Rick Wamsley were kind of changing things up in 1986, but 3 goalies in the 1990 playoffs. That had to be odd, because you not only did you not know if you were going to be starting that night, but you may not even be dressing that night.
Or not even lasting 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if Mike thought we were relief pitchers at the time. I think he did, because we were in and out so much, we didn't know what was going on. I don't really want to comment on that era, to be honest with you, with that particular situation. It may come out to be negative, and it probably will. So I prefer not to. It wasn't fun. I wish I could say that it was a good time in my career, but it certainly there's a million stories I could tell. I don't think it's appropriate that I do. Uh, I guess the good news is that when I did leave Chicago, I got beat out by Belfour and Hasek. So that
Yeah,
wasn't
that's
so
true.
bad. That
Yep.
wasn't so bad. I can give you a funny story though. I remember this so well. We were in Milwaukee in an exhibition game, and I had heard all about this Hasek guy. This is the next year, I believe, coming in, and he played goal in Milwaukee. I was in the stands, not playing that night. We were moving on to another city to play another game, and I was sitting with my dear friend Steve Larmer, who, by the way, from the same town that I live in here in Peterborough, Ontario. We see a lot of each other. And Hasek was in net. At one point, he came back to his crease, ended up halfway to the blue line without his blocker, without his catcher, and without a stick, and he was playing barehanded. And I said to Steve, that's not the way you play goal. I mean, there's no way this guy's going to beat me out. Look at this guy. You know what he said to me? Oh, yes, he will. He's got the quickest feet I've ever seen. My
Wow.
best friend, and or one of my best friends, and he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong.
Wow.
He came on. It was unorthodox, but he knew how to stop pucks. But it was pretty funny at the time. But yeah, but the Chicago years. I mean, the good news about the Chicago years, we enjoyed the city a lot. Met a lot of great friends, and Dennis Savard and Doug Wilson, and some great teammates. You had to be great teammates under the situation that was going on at times. And so there were some positives there, but it was a tough situation for me. I'm not going to lie at that time.
Yeah, you're not the only one. We've heard stories from other past Blackhawks that say the same thing. So again, looking back at your full career, which spanned across multiple teams, who was the best goalie that you think you matched up against, whether it was in just a regular season or even
Oh boy,
playoffs? Yeah, I know
boy,
it's a tough one.
I'm an old guy now. It's hard to get back to all these things. Well, I played in so many different eras. Like I played against Jerry Cheevers, I played against Tony O, Chicago. I mean, Ken Dryden I played against. Then you go farther on to Patrick Waugh as a kid. I'll never forget Patrick Waugh. I was right in St. Louis, and he won an early game in his career, and we had to skate by each other, right? So we lost the game. Montreal always liked to beat us in our home rink, and
Of course.
he's chirping me. And I'm looking at it, I'm going like, who the heck is this guy? Why is he chirping me? I mean, he just won a game. Big deal. You're a young kid. Shut up, rookie. Well, I guess I found out why he was chirping me. He turned out to be a pretty good player.
Yeah, yeah,
But
he wasn't bad.
he wasn't bad. So, but I mean, I've been very fortunate playing in 3 different decades. You do certainly have a chance to play against some great players. The greatest player I ever played against, with all due respect to Mario, was Wayne. Guy Lafleur flying down the wing. It was Montreal. Those Montreal teams were amazing at the time, so they had a lot of great players. But it's like all different teams. You go across the National Hockey League right now, and you can say there's a handful of goalies that are spectacular that stick out. You could say the same about forwards and defense.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So talking about your announcing career, what you moved on to after playing, you've worked with some pretty unbelievable announcers: Jim Hewson, Chris Cuthbert, Bob Cole, and then of course you've also worked the '07 and '08 Stanley Cup Final, amongst many other things I know that you've called in the past. What's it like working with really a Hall of Famer like Bob Cole, and then even the other guys who do such a great job calling the game? I mean, do they make your job easy, or is it, man, I really got to step my game up to sound like I belong with these guys?
Well, I'll circle back and tell you a quick story first of all, because it's a Darren Pang story. We started by practicing together in Chicago. Oddly enough, John Shannon, who's one of the all-time best TV executives that I know, now in the media business, said to me in Calgary during that series, when you're done, you should think about broadcasting. So he planted the seed, and then Darren Pang and I was not playing because of you-know-who, and Darren was just out for the first time in his career, and we both wanted to get into broadcasting. So we stood, when I wasn't playing because of you-know-who, I was up in the big, way up the end of the press box with Darren, and we would actually call games. He would call a game, and I'd be the color guy, and we go back and forth.
Nice.
Lisa Seltzer, a longtime director in Chicago, and went on to do network directing, ended up making an audition tape for us. Perrin went one way, I went the other way, and we're both still calling games. So it's really odd. I started.
You did
in,
something right, I guess.
I started in Ottawa, doing Ottawa Senator broadcasts in their first year. So, getting back to your question, I just wanted to add that with the St. Louis connection. Bob Cole was a demanding guy, but an absolute honor to work for. Don Whitman, a real gentleman out the West, who was an icon in our country. Don Chevrier, who you would know for boxing in the U.S. with ESPN. He was my first play-by-play guy. I did the Olympics with him, my first Olympics with him. And of course, Jim Houston, now a Hall of Famer. All these, I can't say enough about Chris Cuthbert, my long-term partner for 10 years, who's now coming back with us, which is going to be fun in Sportsnet. But all of those guys, I feel very honored to be able to work with. They're all fantastic broadcasters, and they all taught me a little something for sure. Bob Cole, probably the one that was the biggest teacher, when he just kept saying, Greg, get out of the way of the game. Let the game breathe and let it call itself. And he was one of the best. He was one of the, I got a better one, but I won't do it to him. But he was one of the best. He gets mad, but he was one of the best teachers, I think. And always, emphasize that less is more. Let the game breathe. And he was more the old school. I'll call a game. When it stops, you do the color. And you know what? I still like that.
Yeah. So again, you've worked multiple different just great moments. I mean, one of the ones that come to mind lately, and Maple Leafs fans won't like talking about this, but the David Ayers incident was one that comes to mind. But again, you've called Stanley Cup Finals. Is there one thing that stands out to you as one of your favorite games to call?
I think all the Olympic games, the three Olympics, certainly are all huge. The gold medal game early on in Lillehammer, when the Peter Forsberg and all that situation in Korea, that was quite something as a young broadcaster. And then, the Stanley Cup Finals were certainly a real special. The outdoor game in Buffalo, when it snowed, it hailed, it did everything. It was a special event. I've been so very fortunate, I think, to cover pretty much everything in our business, and very, very lucky to do so at the national level. And, I feel like I'm just so fortunate. I teach leadership now as well. I went out and got a master's degree in that. And I always try to tell my students, if you can ever find something that you love and that's your passion, you're going to be a very lucky person in life. And I can tell you, I've been very lucky.
Yeah, no, for sure. So someone else that kind of, I guess, followed his passion was your son, Charlie, went on to play goalie in the ECHL as far as the Orlando Solar Bears. I don't know if he's still playing, but what was it like for you as a father watching your son kind of follow in your footsteps?
I realized very quickly how tough it was on my own dad to watch a goalie. It's horrible. Any parents out there, don't be a goalie dad. It's just the worst, because every time a crummy goal goes in, you feel for everybody on the team, and you're going, oh, Charlie. I don't know how many times I said that. Oh, Charlie. But in saying that, he followed his passion. I really didn't really want him to be a goalie, to be quite honest with you, but he ended up being a goalie. Really loved it. He's finished now. He's now in sales in Ottawa, and he's actually trying to be a ref. He's been to the NHL Combine. So that's an interesting combination, being an old goalie to a ref. We have quite a few in the NHL, by the way, but he would love to do that, but we'll see. But in the meantime, he's enjoying his new life. He quit on his own, which I was thrilled about. He had enough of going around getting, traded all over the East Coast League and the minors and not making a lot of money doing it. He was 27, I guess, and said that's enough. Thankfully, because I was hoping that would happen, knowing that it probably wasn't going to be his lot in life. But I didn't say a word as a father. I stayed out of the way. I taught him early because nobody else could for a little while. Tried to get out of his way and just let it happen. And for all parents that are hockey parents, the best possible advice I can ever give you is just let them do what they want to do as kids and stay the heck out of the way. And just drive them to the rink, drop them off, and don't say anything. They ask you a question, fine. And I was fortunate enough that I had that relationship with Char. And, they find their way on their own. If they're going to end up playing at an elite level, they do it anyway. And I'd love to see them play all different kinds of sports year round as well. I don't like this year round hockey thing. I don't believe in it. I would love to see parents get back to putting them in baseball or soccer or golf or whatever it is in the summer and getting them away from the game also. I think it's too much right now and we're burning kids out. And you know what? Hardly anybody makes it. So let's be honest here. I mean, start looking at the statistics and you'll find out very quickly. Although St. Louis has been pretty lucky sending a few out with a great program. It's interesting about the minor hockey program in St. Louis. They were able to start from scratch, and they actually had some pros that were able to put input into the program. You can't do that in Canada because everybody's an expert. In fact, They don't listen to us as much, which that's okay. But sometimes it's nice to see that the way the ex-players contributed in St. Louis and the success that a lot of players have had coming out of that program. It's quite remarkable coming from a time when I remember the old screen at, I think, what the heck was that practice rink called? But it was a real beauty. One of the only rinks in town that we used to get dressed at the old St. Louis Arena and then be fully dressed, go to the practice rink, and then drive back in our cars. But there was a little bar on the way home that we'd stop and put beers in the car because it was just down the street from the St. Louis Arena before we went back and showered at the rink.
You're talking about Brentwood Ice Rink?
Brentwood Ice Rink.
And O.B. Clark's?
I know, O.B. Clark's right by the rink. There you go. You're all over it.
Yep. Any hockey players know those stories from those Blues days because
there you go.
That's what it was.
We had a quick guy run in and get us a couple of beer, and then we'd have a quick beer down the street, and then we'd go back and shower. Of course, we were all somebody'd go in that bar with their full equipment on and running shoes. It was great.
I'd love to see that now on a social media video.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for that. Yeah. Probably make it now anyway.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, I mean, the Blues alumni has been fantastic here in St. Louis. We praise them all the time on this show for the programs that they've added. And again, the hockey parents like you, understanding and believing in their children. But I do have to ask, with Charlie wanting to be an NHL ref, possibly, what is that going to be like when he makes a bad call and you're calling the game?
Wow, he's got a long way to go. He's got a long way to go before he gets there. I mean, he's just starting out, and may get some more important games this year. We'll see. But this I don't think this COVID has helped matters much either. So we'll see how it all goes. But I'm not even going there yet. He's got a long way to go, but something that he would like to do. So we'll see. And by then maybe I'll be gone the time he makes it. Who knows? So,
it's true.
I'll just chirp him. What kind of call was that anyway? I mean, that's what I'll do.
Put an earpiece in his ear so that way whenever he makes a bad call, you can just yell at him.
I'm sure it'll be burning.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about real quick, one last question for you. The upcoming NHL tournament, you as a media guy working, with Maple Leafs games, the Maple Leafs obviously being involved, and Hockey Night in Canada probably still being a thing during the tournament. What have they told you? Like, what's your job going to be like? What's going to be different for you, or do you even know that yet?
My job is going to be terrific because I'm going to be at the lake on my dock having a few beers, maybe going over to the other cabin and watching the odd game.
Okay.
There's 2 crews being used. Well, you know what? I don't even know if this is official yet, so I better be quiet here. But anyway, I won't be working. I know that. And I do know what's interesting, though, is that the producer and directors, I think they have to be as part of the bubble too. So they're going to be away from their house until October, locked in a bubble, which will be pretty challenging. It's going to be interesting. I mean, we're not there yet. I hope they make it. They've got a long couple of weeks here to see if players don't get ill. I hope they don't. I'm sure there's going to be some challenges moving forward. It's not easy right now. I commend the NHL for trying, and we'll see how it, fingers crossed, it works out, and it's great for the fans and the players, but they got some work cut out for them, I think, in this thing. This is a terrible disease. It's a horrible situation across the world right now, and most importantly for all of us, I'm sure, I'm not sure, I know, is to keep healthy, and that goes for the players and all involved also. Yep,
I'm with you on that. So this has been Greg Millen, announcer for Hockey Night in Canada, color commentator for Maple Leafs broadcasts and Sportsnet Ontario, and of course, a former St. Louis Blue and NHL goaltender. Greg, thank you very much for joining the show. Before we close up here, I want to give you enough time to, obviously, people can hear you on Hockey Night in Canada, as well as Sportsnet Ontario. But if you want to promote any social media or any other work you may be doing, please let our listeners know how they can find you.
You know what? I don't really need to do that. I do teach leadership now, and I do some consulting work. I work with the National Hockey League at millenleadership.com. So there's my little promotion. It's all about character development. So any corporate folks out there that are interested, certainly it's a passion of mine that I'm doing some extensive work in now. But other than that, I'd really like to close by just, again, as I always do, thank the St. Louis fans and the city for giving me probably my best time of my life in hockey. There's no question about that, and I always cherish that and thank everybody involved, all my friends, family, and certainly the fans of St. Louis for that. And other than that, stay safe, folks. It's pretty serious right now, and if you can grab a mask, I would highly recommend it.
That's very true. I think a lot of people would definitely like to hear that from somebody that they respect in the NHL media, because a lot of people need to hear that, unfortunately. But again, yeah, you know what? You have been enshrined in St. Louis history because of your you being on that 1986 team, even with the Blues winning last year. That is still a team that is talked about almost daily here in St. Louis, and especially on this show. So don't worry, you will never be forgotten, Greg Millen, in St. Louis. We all love you.
Well, I feel the same way. That's very kind of you. And congrats, too, to last year's team. We were all loving it, believe me. Any former St. Louis Blues, no matter where you were pretty excited, and particularly excited the way the city was watching all the activity afterwards. That was spectacular to watch and thrilling for all of us.
I'm sure people who listen to you often, being Maple Leafs fans, are very happy to see the Blues beat the Boston Bruins.
I would assume that would be high on their list for sure.
All right, well, Greg, thank you.
I'm not a fan, so I just call games. But yeah, I'm sure our Leaf Nation would have liked that one.
Oh yeah, we heard from a couple Maple Leafs fans that tuned into a couple of our shows, and they said, "Thank you for beating Boston." I was like, "Hey, we were happy to do it."
Yeah, I'm sure you were.
Yep. All right, Greg, thank you very much for joining the show. Again, everybody, that is Greg Millen, and you can hear him on Hockey Night in Canada, as well as Maple Leafs broadcasts on Sportsnet Ontario. Thank you very much, Greg. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. That was fun.